Ruin My Childhood.
Welcome to Ruin My Childhood. I'm Kat.
And I'm Mike.
And you are listening to episode 8. And this episode is about a movie that Mike is not particularly thrilled to have to watch, called Not Quite Human.
I've never seen it.
It's from 1987. It was a TV movie, and it has Alan Thicke. It's a trifecta of corny.
So I love Alan Thicke. I think he's delightful, but I can't think of anything good that he's actually been in, other than Growing Pains. And that's like 80s good, so it's probably not very good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 80s good is a way of describing it. So one of the plot summaries on IMDb is Dr. Jonas Carson, a scientist, invents Chip, an android teenager. Dr. Carson sends Chip to school with his daughter Becky to see whether an android could interact with others, but his former employer decides to try and make a profit by stealing the mechanical boy.
So this is like Astro Boy without all the powers? Does he have powers? Like, does he have like super strength or anything?
Well, of course he's got like some things that are different, but I think you just need to watch the movie.
So what is it about this movie that you liked?
This movie I really liked because it sort of eased me into the concept of artificial intelligence, which before this I knew nothing about. I mean, there were robots and there were humans, and this was something in between, which was super creepy and intriguing. I mean, this concept, which is actually coming to fruition in real life now, like people are marrying androids of sorts. They're not quite the level of AI that this depicts, but you know, we're working on developing these companion robots, and we're working on developing artificial intelligence that is meant to actually learn and become smarter and develop relationships with people. So this is something that I think is definitely becoming closer to reality these days.
So what you're saying is this corny movie, which I'm assuming is corny, was your introduction to like AI, where my introduction to AI was Terminator.
I guess so.
So this is going to be drastically different.
And this is one of those movies that I think was always on whenever we had the free Disney Channel demo, which is probably why I watched it so many times. Because I remember watching this movie at least 6 times when I was a kid, and we didn't even have Disney Channel. We definitely didn't rent this either.
I've never even heard of this movie till a couple weeks ago when we first started the podcast, and you're like, I want to do this movie. I have never even heard of it. I don't know anything about it. I've never seen it. I have zero expectations for this, especially for it being in 1987.
I mean,
so
I don't have
interested in
super
watching
high
it.
expectations for the quality, but I have pretty high expectations for like the warm, fuzzy nostalgia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I should be prepared for, or should I just watch this movie?
Mullets.
Oh. Party in the back, business in the front.
Yeah.
All right. The calm before the storm.
Let's do this.
All right. Let's go watch the movie.
I'm a Disney Sunday movie.
He's a solid 17-year-old state-of-the-art all-American boy.
A scientist has just come up with his greatest invention.
Hi, Dad.
Alan Thicke creates the ultimate kid, but he's not quite human. Sunday.
All right. We are back from watching the movie. What did you think?
You know, honestly, I thought I was going to hate this movie going into it, and I was wrong. I didn't hate it. By no stretch of the imagination was it a good movie, but I had fun watching it.
I think for an 80s TV movie, it was actually really good.
Well, it must have been because it spawned 2 sequels, one in 1992, or sorry, one in 1989 and then one in 1992. So there was Not Quite Human 2 and Still Not Quite Human.
That's pretty ridiculous, honestly.
Yeah.
So, what was it that you thought you were going to dislike about it?
I just thought it was going to be really cheesy. I thought it was going to be boring. I thought, you know, with it being an Android, I thought they were going to try to do some weird TV special effects in the 80s. So I thought it was just going to be like terrible, like almost like there's a GIF that I saw a couple days ago of the Incredible Hulk from the 80s TV show with Lou Ferrigno throwing a bear. It was very obviously a stuffed bear.
Right.
So I thought it was going to be a lot of like just really cheesy special effects that wouldn't stand, you know, it wouldn't hold up to today's standards. And there really wasn't very many special effects. Like there was a few points where you saw like him open up his chest and there was like a circuit board, but
Yeah.
that was really all. And then the slow
It was all
motion effect at
practical
the end
stuff.
when he was running.
It was all just done practical. There were a couple things that were a little bit weird to me that they didn't try to do that I didn't really think about before when I watched this. I was surprised for the time that they didn't do something to sort of like digitize his voice, at least in the beginning, or to make him sound more robotic.
Like robotic initially, and then he evolves a little bit.
Right. That was a little weird to me.
The problem that I have with movies like this, and even like Iron Man 2008 version with Robert Downey Jr., is when you have these movies that take place in a like a modern time, but then they have this like obviously future tech that just doesn't fit in with like anything else that the world has.
Right.
Like it kind of bothers me. Like this guy made a battery that could run a person that can run faster than a cheetah, lift 1,000 pounds, and had a small enough battery that fits in a person and works for 10 hours.
And
like,
it plugs in with like a regular, like it's not even a grounded
Not
plug
even a grounded
that goes
plug.
into the wall.
Yeah, not like you would think, okay, maybe something like electric washer or dryer uses, but no, just a regular non-grounded plug. So this guy could be revolutionizing the energy world.
Right.
And everything,
like,
having
you
these
can
large
charge
batteries.
that whole android in like half an hour, apparently. So there's this scene where basically Chip, who is the android teenage boy, runs out of power and he goes to, is it a friend's house or just some random
No,
guy?
so at that point it was just some random well, that was the thing that was weird about this movie is none of the like secondary characters really had defined roles. Like
they were
switched.
lucky if they had names.
Yeah, so like the guy that you're talking about, he like rescued him from getting like beat up by some bully, but then like this guy was like, he's my new best friend, and then he invites him over to his house, but then he's like immediately like kicks him out of the house for knowing more about computers, and then he's just
Right.
kind of a jerk to him the rest of the movie. So
he's a total
like,
jerk to him. But
it
like
makes
Chip
no
goes
sense.
to his house because he's low on power, and he disappears into his bathroom just for half an hour to charge up his battery. And apparently his battery lasts for about 10 hours. We're not really sure exactly why it ran out at that time, though.
because he had charged this was the second day of school, and he had charged the night before. I don't know.
I mean, like, there are a lot of things that don't make sense about this movie.
No. There was surprisingly a lot of like stars, well, not stars, but people who got really big a few years after this movie. Christy Swanson was in it, and she was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the original one. Mm-hmm. And then I can't remember, his name's like Sasha Mitchell, or I think is what it is, and he was right after
Was he
this.
the guy who went to jail?
Yeah, he was in Step by Step, but he did a lot of like karate and martial arts movies, and he was like my favorite character on Step by Step. But then he like beat his wife or something like that, and went to jail. Understandably, if you beat your wife, you should go to jail.
He's a jerk.
He is a jerk, and I no longer like him. So those two people were in it, which was surprising.
Well, and the girl who plays Becky,
Teen Witch.
yeah, she was in Teen Witch, and she's a formidable rapper, apparently.
No, she doesn't sing that. She doesn't sing Top That. That's not her in that
That's
movie.
good.
That's the best friend in that movie who sings that song.
It's horrendous.
But yeah, as I was saying, like things that bother me is like, in addition to like him having this battery that could revolutionize the world, he also made skin for this synthetic person that
Right.
feels real. Like that could be a boon for burn victims and stuff like that. Like a synthetic skin so they don't look, disfigured. Like there's so many things that he invented to make this android that could have made the world a much better place. Like what's the purpose of the android?
I mean, like, we have synthetic skin that looks like that, and it doesn't have any place in the medical world. It is all the adult entertainment industry.
But I'm just saying, like, there's something like with what he's done, he could have made the world a better place with
Like, he
the
has a lot
intellect
of
that he has.
expertise in a lot of areas. What bothers me about the skin specifically is, like, at one point he pounds nails into a crate with his fists.
Yep.
And like, he weighs 300 pounds.
400
He said
pounds.
400 pounds at some point, and he's super strong. So how is the skin strong enough that he's not puncturing it with these nails when he pounds
it's
them in?
possible that it's a stronger material than skin. They just said it feels like skin. So it's possible that it's still some like polyurethane blend that's still stronger than the skin, because it's got to be able to.
silicone.
But it's got to be strong enough that it's like his metal joints and stuff aren't going to rip through it when he makes a fist. So it's got to be pretty strong, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, like, most animatronic people, or like animatronic babies. They have silicone animatronic babies, and they have armatures. Some of them are motorized, and it's all silicone, airbrushed silicone.
So I'm going to say something controversial. I think Alan Thicke, who's supposed to be the good guy in this movie, is actually the villain.
What?
Think about it. So he had a contract with this toy company to make a prototype of a robotic bunny that he just didn't do. And then he sent like a really crappy version of it to like not his boss, but his boss's boss, to get his boss in trouble. So he like didn't do his job that he was contracted to do, took the money to build his, crazy scientist experiment, and then didn't really program Chip in such a way that let's be real, Chip would have totally been known. Everyone would have been like, what the hell is this guy's problem? And just moves across the country, and like he could have been helping the world. He's a bad guy. He's no good.
He's not a bad guy. He is irresponsible at worst.
Okay.
He's bad with money, and he is lacking in legal expertise.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was funny is he had the foresight to program Chip not to do the sister's homework or chores.
Right.
Which, okay, I get it. So he thinks of things like that. He also thought of, okay, I need him to fit in as a boy, so I'm going to give him a 12th grade education, so he's slightly smarter than his peers. So he obviously put some thought into what he was going to program, and he understands English. He's really smart. Why did he not program any sense of humor or any of the phrase? Like, he didn't know any expressions or idioms or anything. Like, he didn't even know.
Because a sense of humor is something that's so fluid, even from person to person. Like, if you try and make a sarcastic joke with my grandma, who is this little Mexican woman, it will be right over her head. Like, her generation, her culture, they do not understand sarcasm.
No, I get that. Like,
whereas,
you wouldn't maybe.
If you say something sarcastic to a person, like a stranger on a bus in LA, they would probably get it. So there's no real way to program humor ahead of time. He would have to learn individual sense of humors.
I guess humor, but maybe the idioms and common phrases are things that he should have been programmed with.
They go over this in Bicentennial Man, too. He tries to learn how to tell jokes.
And he does. He tells jokes almost immediately. That was what makes him...
it's a learned thing. He learns what each individual person finds funny.
I don't remember that movie, so I'm going to take your word for it.
On people. That's a great movie.
I definitely want to watch it again. I remember liking it. The other thing is, like, how quick does programming a robot take? Because at one point they're like, oh, the dance is tomorrow. I'm going to program all your dance moves. And he programs like all the dance moves he knows. And then later on, like earlier, he does program slang and common phrases into him, but they're phrases that Alan Thicke knew in the 70s.
He's supposed to be like true AI, where he's just learning these things. So if he observes something, he's programmed.
Yeah. There was some funny stuff. Like, I thought it was going to be really lame.
I genuinely laughed at a lot of the jokes. Like, they were like dad humor, but they were funny.
Yeah. And the part when he's with the teacher and he's doing like everything she says literally was pretty funny. Right. And then throughout, like, I expected to have, I actually watched for this. There's a point where Alan Thicke's character tells him to keep his fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And later on, like, this is presumably hours into the movie later, he's walking around and he has his fingers crossed still, and the characters are like, what are you doing? It's like, my dad told me to do this kind of thing.
Right.
And I was watching film, like, I bet that they don't do it, and they did. So I was impressed with the continuity on that.
Yeah, there was really good continuity, and I liked that. It's interesting. There were like two sets of secondary characters in this movie. There were the secondary characters that relate directly to Chip in like his school environment and Becky's school environment, and then there were the secondary characters.
Oh, the bad guys.
The bad guys who work with the dad, and their performances were just entirely over the top, like in the vein of I Love Lucy and The Producers type humor.
Yeah.
Like all of their performances were completely different from the other set of secondary characters. But I really liked that, you know, a lot of the reactions and things that the teenage set of secondary characters would say to Chip were things that, you know, they might be legitimate reactions, and it's, you know, like, obviously the viewer understands the situation and they don't, but I think their reactions were pretty believable if they were all just like somewhat more sensitive than the average teenage population.
Yeah.
Because like back in the day, if a kid was weird, like people were more likely to just be like, okay,
He's
you know,
slow.
Leave them be. Like these days we'll be like, okay, Chip has Asperger's. No big deal, you know, but I think they were unusually understanding.
Everybody thought it was really funny. I think it's because they thought
And
it
they
was
thought
really
that
funny
he was
with
a
the
jokester.
Yeah. You know what was really funny? He knew who the Three Stooges were before he knew anything about comedy or expression. So it's interesting that he knew the Three Stooges. So Alan Thicke's character must have been a Three Stooges fan to program Three Stooges knowledge in.
He
'Cause this was
apparently had a
pre-internet.
12th grade education too.
Yeah.
So you know that he had to have like programmed quite a bit of information at this point, whether it was like from plugging him into websites, whatever websites actually existed at the time. What was this, 87?
87, yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were electronic databases that he could plausibly have been plugged into, but they weren't something that would have existed in their home.
So this is we try to keep this podcast pretty family friendly, so I'm going to phrase this in a way that is as friendly as I can keep it. So the whole point of this experiment is to see if an artificial intelligence can fit in real life, right?
Well, no, he specifically says that the point of the experiment is to see how human he can make Chip.
Okay, so it's to see how human, but he puts him into a high school to see if he fits in, right?
And I do want to touch on that when you're done.
Okay, so is he anatomically correct to fit in the gym class in the locker room?
I mean, like, does everyone actually change in gym?
Well, in the 80s, people showered and stuff in the gym. Like when I was in middle school, we didn't have like showers in our locker room. But in high school there is, and some people shower, but some people don't. But when you watch like old movies, you always saw people showering and stuff.
Well, he wouldn't have been
PE
able to shower because at one point, doesn't someone like spill a drink on him at the dance and he starts smoking from his chest?
Is that what happened? I
compartment?
missed that.
I
thought
think so.
Because he said that was okay. So, well, you said you had something, then I'll come back to it. What did you have?
Oh, right. So, like in that scene, I thought it was like pretty awesome that what's her face, the blonde chick who was kind of like crushing
Christy
on him the
Swanson?
whole movie. Yeah.
Buffy?
So his chest plate starts smoking and he like goes into a closet or a bathroom or whatever. And she's like, Chip, are you okay? What's happening? He's like, I'm smoking. And, you know, she's like trying to be supportive of him trying to quit smoking. It's just interesting. It like falls into that category of all the teenagers being unusually supportive and understanding. But, you know, touching on the whole point of the experiment is to make him more human. At one point, the dad says, I was hoping that he would not have the violence or prejudice of humans, which doesn't make sense because if the whole point was to make him human, he would be learning the same way a child does. And children learn prejudice and violence pretty early, like age 3, age 2, age 3, somewhere in there. So it doesn't really make sense that he would have these expectations for this experiment if he really did want to see how human he could make Chip.
Well, he also put restrictions on him, like he can't harm a person.
And he has to help a human in need.
He has to help any human in need. So he's already not going to be a person because he's going to have this programming that forces him to do things that he might not want to do in those moments.
But if for Chip's own survival, you would think that he would be able to learn what a gangbanger looks like or a group of people walking towards him with a baseball bat look like because they could potentially harm him and incapacitate him. So he would have to learn some self-preservation skills, which is where humans develop their prejudice to a certain extent. We learn what to look for in people that could stereotypically cause harm to us. Like that's what prejudice is evolutionarily rooted in.
Yes, I agree.
So I thought that didn't really make sense.
No,
you
it didn't.
These expectations, and yet, for all intents and purposes, from what we observe, Chip really is true AI in that he's learning the same way a child does.
With very few restrictions, yeah, for the most
Yeah.
part. One of the things that was kind of funny in this movie is you brought up I'm smoking and he's like repairing himself.
Right.
So he calls for his dad, but his dad is at the dance and he's dancing with the school psychiatrist. And he's calling him, and then after the fact, when they get home, he's like, "Oh, how was the dance?" He's like, "Oh, I had a malfunction. I repaired." And he's like, "You repaired yourself? That's great."
Right, and he doesn't even
then
check
he doesn't
in like
have
what
any,
he did.
yeah,
Make sure
no
he didn't
follow
screw
up
stuff up.
Yeah, which is weird. So there's just a lot of little logic gaps that don't make sense in this movie. Like the bad guys, we haven't really touched on them. You mentioned that they're over the top. There's the one guy who mentions that the other scientist has mentioned that he's known Alan Thicke's character for years and years and years, and he figures out, he's like, oh, he mentioned that he was going to make an android a long time ago. He must have done it. And he has a weird memory lapse problem where he always forgets things. And his whole thing is he wants to be a scientist and start creating things again. Alan Thicke left. He's the resident scientist. He could make things in that lab now. Yeah. And his whole thing is like, oh, if we go and get this thing, we will be rich. Why would he be rich?
Well, here's the thing with those contracts. If you're contracted to a company, the company
owns the stuff.
Anything, like even intellectual property that you create while you are contracted with that company owns it.
No, I get that. I get the main guy, but I mean the other scientist. The other scientist wouldn't have any stake in it. Well, he would, because if he is still with the company and they release this technology, then his name is on all those publications. I guess
it's
so.
on
It
those
didn't make
patents
sense.
and stuff.
But it was he was very like mustache twirling evil guy. It didn't really make sense that he went from...
Like the main villain, what is he? He's not like the president of the company because he has to answer to someone, obviously, but he is...
Well,
what is Alan Thicke's character's name anyway?
I don't remember.
I can't remember what his name is.
Well, so they were actually so they make robotics and then they sell it to a toy company. So they're like a third-party company. So the guy that he was answering to represented the toy company that normally buys their war toys.
Right.
So, I don't know.
It just seemed, like the main villain was just over the top villainous. And right off the bat, he's villainous. Like, he is not concerned for Alan Thicke. Like, why has he not shown up to work? What's going on? Like, basically, if you're running a company like that, you want to keep your scientists and the people who are producing these products and developing technology, you want to keep them happy so they work well for you. Instead, he is like straight up harassing this guy. He calls his daughter as harassing her. Then he shows up at their house.
And calls them twerps.
Right. Like,
the
he
three
shows
twerp
up
family.
at their house. Why does he think Becky's a twerp? Like, how much contact has he had with this poor scientist's daughter at this point?
Right.
That he would call her that. But yeah, he was just like right off the bat, really in his face, super invasive, doing super inappropriate things, like showing up at his house. He had like this weird, slightly grown out Hitler hairstyle. And it just seemed like he was already super evil and it had escalated before we even met that character.
Right.
But we don't know why his motivation was so strong. What was his motivation other than being on a deadline with this yoked out bunny rabbit that they were developing?
I think other than that, once they realized the potential of Alan Thicke's android chip, he just figured like, oh, we could be millionaires selling this stuff. I think that's all it ended up being, is he just saw the dollar signs.
Interesting. One thing that I thought was hilarious, this is like a total side note, but whenever they have the establishing shot of the toy company headquarters, the statue they have outside, I think it's a Rodin or something, it's like the most expensive sculpture that they have in the original Sims game.
I'm going to take your word on that.
It is. It was like, if your Sims could afford this sculpture, you had arrived. Occasionally you'd glitch and get stuck in a corner, but you had a badass sculpture.
You know something else that I thought was funny?
What?
Do you remember the part where Alan Thicke kind of like describes what he can do towards the beginning of the movie?
Right.
So he goes,
he can outrun a cheetah.
Yeah, so this is the quote. What boy can lift a ton, see around corners, and outrun a cheetah? See around corners? How do you do that? What does that even mean?
I thought that was amazing. And it's like, it's especially funny now because we have been developing, specifically with the intent to create technology like Chip. We've been trying to develop this for 50 years, and Asimo still can't go up and down stairs. But Chip, he can do stairs, he can see around corners, he can outrun a cheetah.
He can dance.
Chip is...
He could do backflips and stuff.
He
does backflips like twice in the movie.
He might have a penis.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Oh, man.
They strip him down. It's just like a Ken doll bulge.
Well, the thing that's weird is that he might not be anatomically correct, because in the very first day of school, there's a point where like the gym teacher who like bumps him or like grabs him, and I guess he's got like a voice speed dial, like an old turntable on his like nipple, because he's like talking like super fast for the rest of the day, and then Alan Thicke comes and he like turns it. Why
wouldn't he hear it and notice and then turn it down?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know why I whispered that.
I don't know.
I don't know. That didn't make sense. But then they mentioned that he had
snow.
Stop it. They also mentioned that he had like some switch on his arm, and then that knob on his chest for the volume control, and then he had that leg control. Yeah, the speed control, and then he also had that where his power cord came out at his ankle. There's like a hatch there that has like the little power cord that's only a few inches long. Like when he was charging, he had to like have his leg up on the counter and then had it plugged in. It was like a little 6-inch adapter. Oh my god! But overall,
that's
like
the only 6-inch adapter he has.
Oh. But overall, like this movie, like obviously we're making fun of it a lot, like poking holes in the logic. But I had fun watching it. I expected it just to be really bad. I can see why you liked it as a kid. I would have liked this as a kid as well.
I guarantee you would have liked this as a kid.
Oh, you guarantee it?
I guarantee it.
It's weird that I hadn't seen it, considering there was 3 of these movies.
Right.
That's so weird.
It's an android. Okay, it is kind of weird to me that, what is that girl's name? Erin, the blonde chick. She, like, puts the moves on him, and she kisses him, and he's just kind of, like, standing there, and she, like, doesn't notice that his face isn't moving or anything.
Right, and she doesn't notice anything. It doesn't make sense. Like, the way he talks, the way he moves, like, something's clearly wrong with him. like
at what point is she, like, am I taking advantage of someone who
is slow?
Right.
Well, that's the thing.
She doesn't seem to mind, though.
With these movies, like I believe we talked about it in the beginning part where you mentioned like this was your first kind of like movie about AI and robots that you saw. Right. And I mentioned like I grew up with like Terminator. It's just weird, like these movies with these cybernetic android robot people, how nobody ever looks at them like these guys don't make sense. Like even in Terminator, he's like the most obvious person that you would see in a crowd. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger's huge, but he just doesn't get humor. He doesn't get basic metaphors. And this same thing, he doesn't understand basic metaphors and similes and stuff like that. Like these people would totally stand out, and that's something that's always bugs me in these movies. And maybe it's just because we're watching it as an audience, and that's the whole dramatic irony that we know what's going on, but characters don't.
I think the characters kind of like chalk it up to cultural difference. Like, have you ever tried to joke with a Russian?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing.
It doesn't work very well.
I mean, like, I love the Russians. Shout out to Vicky.
So does Trump. He loves the Russians.
Oh, moving closer to impeachment, baby.
Ow, ow.
Things are looking up. Oh, one thing I noticed that kind of bugged me about the character Becky is in the beginning of the movie, she's like super typical 80s portrayal of teens. How they always kind of portrayed them as like a little bit snotty, a little bit aloof, like more so than teens are. And then she has this big blow up, and her dad is like this brilliant engineer and scientist, and he has created artificial life. And she actually says, I just made the cheerleading team, because she's upset that they're going to have to move again. And like they kind of have a blow up, and basically,
but she immediately changes. Like she comes down, like probably
she does, but then
an
they
hour
hug,
later.
and he's like, I really love you, and like all this. So it's like she's really shallow and short-sighted just for that one scene. And then after that, her character completely changes, and she's like the best teenage daughter ever.
Well, not really, because she does have the scene where she's supposed to take Chip home, and then she doesn't. So she blows off Chip.
She wants to get some action.
Yeah, so she does that. She does try to get Chip to do her homework. So she's not perfect. But by the end of this movie, so how long do you think this movie took place? Like, what's the time period of this movie?
I'd say like a month and a half.
I don't think it's that long.
Why?
Because,
they have to like get to a school dance.
So they have to get to school. So this is what happens.
So that wouldn't have been within the first month of school year.
Well, no, it wasn't the first month of the school year. They moved in the middle of the month, or in the middle of the school year. She was
How do you
already
know that?
Because she was already on the cheerleading team, and they do that during the school year.
You could try out at the beginning of the school year.
It could be at the beginning of the school year, but there's normally a dance within the first month or two of school. But she was already in
Are you just
school.
lying to me because
No,
I was
I'm not-
homeschooled
no.
and I don't know any better?
No, you can do
You're taking advantage of me.
Stop it. They move within days. Then they go to the school. Then they have the first day of school where he goes to the principal's office. And then the second day of school is when he goes to that other guy's house to recharge. And then they have like a big blow. Like they have that argument about she shouldn't she should be responsible for him. And then like they have a little conversation about running away from the loved ones and everything like that. And he realizes like she's asking him to do the exact opposite of what she's doing with her boyfriend guy. And then the next day is that they start talking about the dance. Like it all seems like it takes place within like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. And then by the end of the movie, she's like, I love him. Like they think he dies.
Right.
They think he dies. I don't know how we didn't talk about this yet, but he's on the table. Alan Thicke tries to repair him. He's like, I can't repair him. And then she's like, he's dead.
How much can he really die though? Like he knew how he programmed him initially. So even if his like memory gets wiped, he can reprogram him in a similar manner. Yeah,
totally. But if his hard drive got erased, whatever. But there are people who are like data experts who can get stuff back that you think has been erased. But
I mean, I do get it though, because like when the computer crashes and I lose all of my Sims mods, like it's pretty devastating.
Well, she's like, I loved him. It's like it's been like a week, and you've been like annoyed by him like the entire time.
That's her brother.
It's not her brother.
It's her robot brother.
It's not her brother. He's got no personality. He's a drastically different person every day. She doesn't even know him because every day they reprogram him with something else.
I mean, like, did you not get somewhat emotionally attached to your Tamagotchi?
Not at all.
When they died, did you feel bad?
No.
You're a cold person, Michael. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, not really. I would say this couldn't ruin my childhood because it wasn't part of my childhood, but I probably would have liked it as a kid. As an adult, I don't think it's a good movie. Like, it doesn't really have like an arc, like a first, second, and third act. But it was entertaining. Like, it made me laugh a couple of times, so I'm sure I would have liked it as a kid. So what did you think? Did it ruin your childhood?
Definitely not. I mean, I did not have high expectations for it. I remembered really liking it, but then when I read up on it again, I'm like, oh, Alan Thicke. Oh, 1987. Oh, TV movie. And I just, I was a little bit wary of it kind of ruining the film for me. But now, like, revisiting it as an adult, it's still funny to me. It's still entertaining. And it's always fun to go back and look at the way we perceive technology of the future and how different it actually is.
How different it actually happens, yeah.
Like that stare thing is not happening anytime soon.
No.
So, no, this did not ruin my childhood. And I think I actually kind of want to watch the sequels.
I don't. I don't want to watch any more of it. I think I got a good taste of what it is. And I can't imagine they get better.
Probably not.
So, some people may have noticed we're switching to an every other week kind of thing. We do run 2 podcasts, so it's kind of tricky to do 2 of them every week. So
nobody noticed.
But if you did, we're gonna have Remake Rewind 1 week, then Ruin My Childhood the next week. So they're alternating. So yeah, we're on an every other week thing. So in about 2 weeks, you'll hear from us again, and we are going to be talking about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. Yeah. I think it's called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. I apologize for saying it incorrectly first.
Ay.
All right, Katrina, where can they follow you?
They can follow me all over the internet at KatrinaOssity, especially on YouTube. I have most of my stuff on there. And
you guys can follow the MDXpods network at MDXpods.com, on Instagram and Twitter at MDXpods. Please check out Remake Rewind. And we got some new stuff going on right now. Of course, check us out on Patreon. Throw a couple dollars away. Help support us.
Throw a couple dollars away. No, invest in art.
Invest in art. I said our way, not throw it away.
Oh, it sounded like throw a couple dollars away.
Anyway, but we also are Amazon affiliate, so we will have the link in the description of this episode. You already are shopping on Amazon anyway, so invest in some art. You go click on our link, it'll bring you right back to your page, and anything you buy, we get a 2 to 10% part of it, so that's pretty cool.
And on iPhone, if you just go to enter the Amazon affiliate link and then open it, you can actually save that link URL to your desktop, so to speak, on your phone. And so whenever you're going to be shopping on Amazon, you just open up that link that you saved and you're ready to go.
Other than that, I've got nothing else. Thank you guys for listening.
Thanks for listening.